have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
Will you be joining us this week?
I'm Ann Northrup.
Hello, Ann.
Hi. Minnesota in the headlines this week is the 12th, count 'em, 12th state, plus the District of Columbia, of course, to open marriage to same-sex couples. Will Illinois be the 13th?
It's beginning to sound like a board game.
And Brazil is ordered by a judicial panel to legalize same-sex marriage nationwide.
But back in this country, Republicans are continuing to balk at the inclusion of binational same-sex couples in the immigration bill. And New York's Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer is non-committal.
And he's part of the Gang of Eight that's putting it together. We will update you on the wave of anti-gay violence in New York City.
Really sad stories. The out lesbian candidate for mayor of New York City, Christine Quinn, in a preview of her book that's going to be released shortly, comes out about some serious health issues. And some gay and lesbian and bi notables come out for one of her opponents.
An 18-year-old son stands for his lesbian moms at a Nevada hearing on marriage equality. We're going to bring you the videotape.
It's very moving and terrific. The California Assembly has passed 2 transgender rights bills.
The parents of an intersexed child in South Carolina are suing the doctors for mutilating him as an infant.
There was a particularly brutal murder of a gay man in Volgograd, Russia, that is being attributed to homophobia. And Moscow, the city council or mayor, has denied a permit to those who want to march in protest.
We're going to give you a glimpse of HBO's movie on Liberace with Michael Douglas as Lee and Matt Damon as his lover.
Scott Thorson, sit down in front of your TVs and don't move for a week until this comes on. Andy will also be reviewing a couple of theatrical performances, Queer Spawn and Colin Quinn's Unconstitutional. But we start in the upper Midwest of Minnesota.
Since last we saw you, first of all, the House of Representatives voted 75 to 59, mostly along party lines, to approve marriage equality. And then the Senate voted 37 to 30 on Monday, and Governor Mark Dayton signed the bill on Tuesday.
There's a terrific picture of out gay State Senator Scott Dibble and his partner coming up the steps of the state capitol with the huge crowd outside waiting for this vote to happen in the Senate. It was really a joyous occasion attended by thousands of people. Every time we see these votes now, we see big crowds. We've shown them all over the place, including New Zealand.
Well, as I said to you, when we had it in New York and we had the Pride March and Governor Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo, was there at the head of the thing, I never saw such joy coming out of people. For better or for worse, this is giving people a lot of happiness.
Well, and I would assert,
as they say in marriage.
Yes, but to speak in opposition to those who say, well, why marriage is our only issue. This joy is not just about marriage. This joy is about us as first-class citizens. And these marriage votes are both concrete and symbolic measures of equality. They have much larger implications than just marriage. Yes. And I am really sorry that people can't see that, and I wish they would broaden their view.
Well, but we will also get to the fact that we're not respected by everybody.
Well, of course not. This is a step on that trail.
Yes.
This is the way we get to the broader issues.
And lest we forget, this in Minnesota is just 6 months after the voters rejected a constitutional amendment to ban same-sex marriage in their constitution.
Which for a long time we thought we were going to have trouble defeating. And yet here we have the state legislature by significant margins approving same-sex marriage. And the and all the polls of the populace also supporting it. And look what they did with the bridge in Minneapolis, the I-35 bridge, which is the one that collapsed a few years ago.
Now look at it.
Look at it.
Resplendent in rainbow colors.
Garish rainbow colors on the I-35 bridge in Minneapolis.
Now, you mentioned Senator Scott Dibble, who's out. We should also mention the out House members. Karen Clark, who's been there forever, right?
Yes.
I mean, she's a very long time. And Susan Allen. Now, we now have a country in which according to the Williams Institute, more than 1 in 5 Americans live in a state where gay people can get married to each other.
And the District of Columbia, 22%. And if Illinois and California come around in the next few months, it will be 41%. But I would actually quote you and say we live in a country where every single one of those same-sex couples can get married.
Well, they can get married, but they don't.
They just can't necessarily get married where
You
they
can
live.
go to a state where it's legal. You can come here to New York. You're most welcome. Now, Michelle Bachmann said, we must now turn to spiritual warfare to fight Satan and his gay marriage in Minnesota. Just the spiritual warfare was her quote. But she did talk about Satan.
Someone also said to me, was it really a quote of hers that she was going to move to another place?
I kept looking for that after I saw the headline, but I couldn't find it.
I think it must be a joke. But who
if
knows?
only.
Yeah, please. Go to... which is it? Paraguay.
Yeah.
They've turned down same-sex
Now,
marriage.
the Minnesota law takes effect August 1st. We're a little unclear whether people are going to be able to apply beforehand and then get married on August 1st, because they are supposedly opening up the bureaus at 12:01 a.m. on August the 1st.
Right.
So I assume they're going to get people married then.
Well,
somehow.
we'll see.
You figure it out.
We are on the verge of legalizing same-sex marriage in Illinois. One house of the legislature has passed it. We're waiting for the other, and they're waiting until they can be sure they have the votes there. That would be the House. And this week, Illinois Governor Quinn asked the House directly to vote for same-sex marriage. There are also robocalls going out to legislators from Julian Bond and from our now cut from the Baltimore Ravens, Brendan Ayanbadejo.
More about that later, but that they are calling in African American districts to pressure African American senators to vote for this bill.
House members.
Was it House?
It's already passed the Senate.
Okay, all right. Districts.
At any rate, Illinois is at the
Touch
tipping
and go.
point.
Touch and go. I hope they have a vote. Then you'll find out how everybody stands.
And we have a new possibility for marriage that had not occurred to us, Florida. Because Charlie Crist, the ex-governor, who is going to run for governor again as a Democrat, even though he is still a closeted gay man who got married to cover that up, has now come out for marriage equality. Stunning.
And there's a rather stunning poll out of Arizona, which says the people there support same-sex marriage by a 55 to 35 margin. Now, in
Michigan, too, they've just done a poll where we came out ahead.
In 2008, Arizona banned same-sex marriage in their constitution. And before that, they defeated an amendment that would have also banned domestic partnerships.
Now, we've been following the progress of same-sex marriage in Nevada. This is a little longer slog because they have a state constitutional amendment barring it, so they have to go through a two-part process. They put it in one bill, but it has an extended process.
Unless the U.S. Supreme Court gives us all our rights.
Maybe. But if they keep it as a state's right, then the state is still going to have to deal with it. And that's the most likely outcome. Right. So they have to have the legislature get rid of the state constitutional amendment and pass same-sex marriage twice in 2 consecutive legislative sessions, and then have the people vote on it.
So they took a lot of testimony this week.
Yeah, they have. One house of the legislature has already passed this combo bill for the first time. So now it's at the Assembly, which would have to pass it, and then we would be finished with the first round of this. So the Assembly's taking testimony, and there are all sorts of things. There's a charming sister and brother who are 11 and 9 who testify, who just couldn't be more adorable. But the one that really stood out to us was this guy, Riley Roberts, 18 years old, and his testimony. He was so emotional.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, he obviously, wrote out, thought about what he was going to say, and if you listen to it, it's a very good statement about it and everything. But I think even just having to say it, he got caught up in the emotion of this, and that's what you're going to see
Well, I
here.
think it also includes his emotion about his parents and about
How he feels about
them and how he feels about the issue. So let's listen to Riley Roberts.
Annie, good evening, Mr. Roberts and Mrs. Roberts. Whoever would like to begin.
Good evening, Chairman Orenshaw and members of the committee. My name is Riley Roberts, and my life is amazing. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about the issue of gay marriage and how it affects my life. What issue? I see no issue. I was born in Reno, Nevada, 18 years ago, and guess who was there? My mom, Pamela Roberts, and Gretchen Miller, my loving parents. And who was there to watch me take my first step? Pamela Roberts and Gretchen Miller. And who was there when I said my first words? My two loving parents. And who was there when I kicked my first soccer ball? My two loving parents. And who can I talk to when I need anything? My two loving parents. And who will be there to see me walk across the stage next month and receive my honors diploma? My two gay, loving parents who have been together for 22 years. They have been with me on my journey through life, and they have supported me through everything. They take me camping, fishing, hunting, everything I could ever want to do. They provide everything for me. My mother, Gretchen, has been paying taxes and paying into Social Security for at least 40 years. But if she dies, my mom, Pam, will not receive those survivor spouse benefits. Why? Because the government doesn't recognize their relationship and as a marriage. They're denied the rights, the freedoms, and the ability to be a full and equal citizen of the United States of America in this great state of Nevada. I love them very much, and I want them to have the same rights that I and my friends have. Some people on the opposing side that think that children are deprived of a father or mother figure if the same-sex couple has raises a child. But when I look at my life and compare it to others of my friends, I see no difference. I am not missing out on anything. I have knowledge and opportunity and like any other child. I can even tie my own tie. My parents love, breathe, speak, feel pain, and most of all, know that their love is more than any paper can do or say, and that they will be together forever. The idea of an opposition to equal rights just bewilders me. I can't even fathom it. How can you not accept my family and other families just like ours, especially after knowing what happened during the civil rights movement? The similarities are numerous, and the fact that people cannot accept gays and lesbians is almost disgusting. Thank you for listening to what I have to say, and I hope everyone knows how much equality means to me and my family, and I hope that you will vote do pass on SJR 13. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts.
Well, I'm all choked up.
I love his saying it's almost disgusting. I would say it is. If you want to share that with your friends or family, go to YouTube and look up Riley Roberts, Nevada Same-Sex Marriage Assembly. You'll find it.
Let's have it go viral, because it's also a very cogent statement of all the issues involved.
And a personification of the emotions involved in a fundamentally important way.
Well, things are changing.
Well, let's show it to Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about him for a minute.
Okay.
Well,
go ahead. You want to talk? You wanted to talk about him, so
No,
you go ahead
I'm
and
sure
talk
we have
about
the
him.
same things to say to Chuck. You go right ahead.
Well, all right. So they're trying to, settle the immigration issue, and the big contention is, are they going to include same-sex partners in this? Essentially, the Uniting American Families Act in it. And the Republicans have announced, especially the Republicans on the Gang of Eight, which is fashioning the bill, this will kill the bill. That's it for the bill if you stick this in. So Chuck Schumer is asked about it, and he says, I haven't decided how I am going to vote, and it keeps me up at night. Well, go to sleep, Chuck, because, your constituents certainly want you to vote for this amendment. Stop being such a coward. Stop compromising before the issue was on the floor. You vote for it because you know it's the right thing to do. And then we'll see what happens, what has to be worked out.
I'm waiting for the Democrats to say, we're not voting for this bill unless and until the binational couples are in it.
Well, that actually does, that actually doesn't seem to be the position of very many people on our side. I
know.
The president has already
Well-
said, I'm not saying I'm going to veto it if it doesn't include the gays.
Well,
and a lot of the gay groups are saying, we don't want to stand in the way of passage of immigration reform if that's going to happen.
And we're
That's been said.
hoping the Supreme Court is going to bail us out on this, because if they strike Section 3 of DOMA, then the binational couples will be taken care of if
But
they
this
get
should
married.
not be a problem for Chuck Schumer.
No, it should not.
But don't forget, he's one of the people who voted for the Defense of Marriage Act. We had to have 2 demonstrations at his house, and he didn't change his position for another 15 years.
He did not change his position until Kirsten Gillibrand was appointed to the United States Senate and embarrassed him by immediately announcing her support for same-sex marriage and dragging him into the right half of that discussion.
Right. Now, but other people are changing. Mother Jones did an article, How the Mormons Ensured Victory for Gay Marriage. It refers to the church's political surrender, opening the way for the recent victories after putting $20 million into the effort to defeat Prop 8 in 2008. Now, the Catholics are still very active. They were especially active in Minnesota. In 2012, Marriage Equality Side outraised the National Organization for Marriage by $20 million in the 4 states where there were ballot initiatives. And Fred Karger of Rights Equal Rights, our friend, said 90% of NOM funding now comes from 10 people.
Oh, yeah. I think that's why they don't want to come clean about who their donors are, because it's just literally a handful of people. But it is interesting that what appears to have happened, I don't know this for sure, is that the Mormons, who got a lot of bad publicity around Prop 8 for having financed that, and
they were
been
quite
the people on
surprised
the
about
ground.
it. They were just standing up for
Shocking.
what everybody's supposed to believe in,
But
and they won these referenda besides.
But unlike the Catholic Church and the NOM people and whomever, they seem to have responded to that bad publicity and backed off. That is the point of this article, at least,
Yes.
that they are no longer pouring their funds and their energy into trying to stop same-sex marriage.
They're also pretty smart with a nickel, Mormons. No, they are. And I think they see it as a bad investment at this point because things are going the other way.
Well, I wish they'd sit the Catholic Church down and tell them that. And the U.S. House of Representatives has given full spousal ID to Representative Mark Pocan, the Democrat from Wisconsin who replaced Tammy Baldwin in the House.
This is a first. They
to
did give,
his husband.
They did give some status to Barney Frank's partner, then husband. But
Oh, yeah, but they're also not giving spousal benefits to Philip Frank.
it's against the law.
Exactly. I'm surprised he even gets an ID. How in the world can they give him a spousal ID when the federal government is not supposed to recognize same-sex marriage?
Yeah, how dare they?
Hypocrites.
How dare they?
Yeah. All
right.
right. Other news?
Okay.
Our new hero, Jason Collins, the out gay basketball player, is getting the Courage Award from GLSEN on Monday, this coming Monday, May 20th.
In New York.
Yeah, and they're also giving the Gay Straight Alliance Award, GSA of the Year, to the Governor Wallace Ryder Farrington High School in Hawaii, and the Educator of the Year Award to Matthew Beck, an elementary school counselor.
Okay.
Congratulations to all.
Now, staying on sports, we told you how Chris Kluwe was cut from the Minnesota Vikings and Brendan Ayabandejo was cut from the Ravens after this season. But Sid Ziegler, he's a gay sports expert, says they were cut due to salary caps, not their advocacy of gay rights.
Right.
That the Vikings had hired a young punter,
Yep.
much cheaper, saving
Yep.
$1 million. And Ayabandejo, I didn't realize, is 36 years old.
Yep.
He's played 10 seasons.
Yep.
So
Well, Jason Collins doesn't have a job for next year either.
Right.
They're all in
he's no kid either.
34, I think. So yeah, all of them may be picked up by other teams. but they haven't been yet. So, but no, I don't think it has to do with their advocacy. I think it has to do with their age and their skill level.
Chris had said it might have been the case, and he wasn't sure. Anyway, and speaking of New York senators, you mentioned Kirsten Gillibrand, our U.S. senator here. She wants to make the Cherry Grove Community House and Theater, put it on the National Register of Historic Places.
I love this.
Calling it one of the first settings for collective gay identity to openly appear in our nation's history. It was established in 1948.
And was established to integrate gay and lesbian interests into governance and social life. She calls it the first LGBT civil rights organization. Is that? It was actually.
It's certainly before Mattachine, which is 1950, although there was Bachelors for Henry Wallace, which a lot of the same people were involved in. And then there's the Society for Individual Rights in Illinois in the 1920s, which was a short, didn't last that long. But
SIR.
Yes, it was called SIR.
Yes. But thank you, Senator Gillibrand. We appreciate that acknowledgement. On the less happy side are all the attacks taking place these days in New York, anti-gay beatings. There's quite a string of them.
And a lot of them are in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's not the only reason we're talking about them. These are really scary. Friday, May 9th, two gay men had to flee to a PATH train station because they were being pursued by gay bashers. The Port Authority broke it up. Two suspects arrested. Assault is a hate crime. Both victims had facial injuries. One required eye surgery. The police are trying to see if it's linked to the earlier attack by Knick fans. The accused are Asalan Barisha and Brian Ramirez, both 21 years old. These crimes often committed by young men.
Almost always. And in fact, we've told you about the attack by the presumed Knick fans on the gay couple outside Madison Square Garden after a Knicks loss. Here is some tape released by the NYPD of people who are persons of interest. You can see some of them looking back at what presumably is the victims after the beating. You know, we mentioned that the perpetrator, one of the perpetrators was wearing a Knicks jersey with the number 7 on it. They're all wearing Knicks jerseys with the number 7.
Okay.
So, but they...
Who's number 7 on the Knicks? We don't know.
I gave up basketball a long time ago.
Okay. Well, so there was, it'll be after we have tape, but a May 16th rally planned by Queers Rising, at the, going from Penn Station, essentially, 7th Avenue with West 33rd.
Madison Square Garden.
And rallying in Chelsea to protest the hate crimes.
But
on May 5th and May 10th.
If you know anything about any of these crimes, if you see any other crimes, if you want to report anything that's happened to you, what you want to do is get in touch with the Anti-Violence Project. And you can do that by going to their website at avp.org, or you can call their hotline at 212-714-1141.
Well, we also, did we talk about the attack outside Pieces?
No.
Well, this is a gay bar on Christopher Street, heart of the gay village. And
That's traditional for gay bashers to go to Christopher Street looking for gay people to beat up.
A guy coming out of the bar was attacked by two men shouting anti-gay slurs. Ugh.
It's really ugly. In Cleveland, the police there have arrested a suspect, a 36-year-old man, a more mature gay basher, suspected in the murder of the transgender woman, Cece Dove, 20 years old. She was the third transgender woman and person of color, transgender, killed in April. Third in April.
Well, some more positive news on transgender folks is what the California Assembly did this past week. Two transgender rights bills, one protecting students, the other making it easier to change your name. And also the Board of Ed in California has approved guidelines for teaching LGBT history. There were two unsuccessful attempts to challenge that law on the ballot.
Yeah, the law passed in California mandates inclusion of LGBT history in the history curriculum. They've gotten a very slow start on it, but changing textbooks is a slow process because those take years to write and be approved, and most of them are what's approved by the Texas Board of Education because they have the biggest budget. And so
Everybody gets the same. No, also the whole state gets the same book as opposed to school districts.
Yes, and then the rest of the country gets the same book because they're writing all these books for Texas.
And it's very interesting because the world was created in 6 days, 10,000 years ago in some of these books.
In Texas. But the new guidelines from the California Board of Ed forbid textbook. This is how they're starting. They're forbidding textbooks that demean, stereotype, or patronize LGBT people. Writing the actual history will take a little longer, but they're getting a start.
And this doesn't mean it all has to be positive. I mean, you could just
it should be real.
We just want people to tell the truth. That's what I've always said. I want to go back to Jason Collins for a second because you remember that ESPN's Chris Broussard went on a religious rant when he came out, and he said, "I would not characterize him as a Christian." Well, ESPN is now meeting with a bunch of religious gay groups and the Reverend Deborah Hafner, who runs the Religious Institute, and the group's Groundswell to sort of work this through with them on this.
I don't like that.
You don't like it because?
Well, I'm all for meetings, but as I said at the time, and as I still believe, Jason Collins started this by identifying himself as a Christian, and I think Chris Broussard, hideous as his comments were, has a right to respond with his definition of what a Christian is.
We respect free speech on this show.
Not that a commercial broadcast network is required to air all points of view.
Unfortunately, which they used to under the Fairness Doctrine, which they don't have anymore in this country. You want to know why everything's so screwed up?
But I think if Jason Collins wants to stand up and say, I am a good Christian, this guy has the right to say, no, you aren't. Not that I agree with him.
Well, speaking of free speech and democracy and all that stuff, let's talk about San Francisco.
Let's do.
All right.
All right. Bradley Manning. This is all Bradley Manning, who we learn more and more about the process in San Francisco of the Pride Committee and how they choose grand marshals and how they run the parade. And all of this is getting very interesting about the governance and who votes and whatever. It turns out they elect several grand marshals, and they have different processes for each. And there is a committee of former grand marshals.
Called the Electoral College.
Which makes no sense. But they have the power to elect a grand marshal for the parade, although their guidelines state that they are not to choose anyone from out of state, which to me is insane, because why not?
Right. If someone's a national hero, wouldn't you want them there?
Of course, and I'm sure they've had grand marshals who were from out of state, but in this case, that's a technicality the Pride Committee is using to try to pull this out.
They didn't get that out
well,
right away.
Well, they should have disallowed him before the vote took place.
And by the way, you know, we do see Bradley Manning as a hero. We know some of you don't. There's disagreements about this, but we're really talking about a process here.
Well, okay.
As well.
But really, we like Bradley Manning.
Yes, we do.
Hate the fact that they're being mean to him. So, so this little committee of former grand marshals elected Bradley Manning as an honorary grand marshal.
Well, actually, he was one of the only. He got the most votes. He got 5
out of 15.
Well, we're being fair here.
Exactly,
Here's what
but
happened.
that's the process they set up. He won.
He won.
And the agreement was that Daniel Ellsberg would appear and stand in for him. Because Bradley is still in jail and is about to go on trial on June 3rd.
And I don't think too many people dispute that Daniel Ellsberg is a hero. This is the guy who
I should hope not.
Put his life at risk and his whole life at risk over getting the Pentagon Papers out, exposing American crimes in the Vietnam War.
Exactly. So
back
anyway,
in the early 70s.
So the fight goes on in San Francisco over this whole debacle, and the Pride Committee finally held a so-called public meeting. They are supposed to hold monthly public meetings. But when a crowd showed up to attend the meeting, a crowd of the public, the Pride Committee said, no, we're not letting you in. We're not letting the press in. We're not letting anybody in. A fight ensued. They let a few people in, then they let a few more people in, more fighting, more exclusion. Daniel Ellsberg showed up. We have 8 minutes of videotape of this, and we want to show it to you. So here is what happened at the Pride Committee meeting in San Francisco.
What's going on is that the board of San Francisco Pride is going to be talking about the Bradley Manning rescinding of his Grand Marshal status, and we're all here to coax them to rescind the rescinding.
This is a public meeting.
The Electoral College put forth their nominees, including Bradley Manning, and it was the board that sent those nominees out to the college.
It's all done legitimately.
Well, I'm hoping there will be discussion that will really reveal to them that they've got to find a way to reinstate him as a Grand Marshal. As Joey Kane, who originally nominated him, said, they had their chance earlier to raise any question of rules about this. They didn't do it until there had been controversy from the Republicans.
I'm concerned that the process wasn't done in such a way that if there was going to be a degree of controversy that would be a problem, the whole idea would never have gotten out of the planning committee in the first place.
Right.
Now it's not only an affront to Manning, an affront to the people who are supportive of Manning, but really, frankly, also concerns me about the reputation of Pride.
We can only have
Carol is the Grand Marshal. I got Carol and I got Channel 2.
It's on 4 hours.
No, but it's a public meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but we can go outside.
No. We're
So thank you for all your
They
work.
haven't told how many people voted altogether then, have they?
I heard from a source that I'm not revealing that there were 15 votes cast in total, and that Bradley had 5, which was the highest vote count.
They issued a statement at 5 p.m. It basically says, oh, oops, guess what? He doesn't qualify because only local people can be nominated by the former Grand Marshals as a Grand Marshal. But why didn't they say that back when he was first nominated by Joey Kane?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. No cameras.
Because you say so. Because you say so. But why is there
no cameras?
My answer to your BAR. Okay. I've been in there to take
Sir, you got to leave your camera down.
I've been.
I'm not in there. What is this? No press. Not in there. It said not in there.
We're not allowing
photography in the room. That's the process that the board is determined for tonight's meeting.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. So can we?
Well, I've been up there several times over the years. For I don't know how many years, 10 years perhaps. They've hired myself and another photographer to photograph the parade. So I was expecting, to be a lively meeting, but certainly to be able to go in and photograph it like I'd done in the past. But not the case. Earl Plant, their new executive director, was in front along with one of their hired security, as he told me on the elevator going down, refused to let any cameras into the room, and we had to leave.
Well, I went into the Pride board meeting. I was the only one let into the meeting because they kept the other activists outside in the hallway. They started the meeting with only me on the inside. They conducted the meeting for about 10 minutes, and then they let other people into the meeting, and these folks said, how did you start the meeting without us on the inside? And the board started over again, and they said, no, we are going to start public comment with those who are in the room, and you're only going to have 1 minute.
Hi, Dan. Could you tell me what happened up there?
I can hardly speak. I'm really quite disgusted with the procedure up there. The idea that 1 minute is to be allowed when I really didn't feel that I could say what I needed to say in 1 minute. All I had time to say was that the statement implying in their official statement Bradley Manning had put troops in harm's way was slanderous, defamatory, and false. Wow. To realize that we had only seconds to take a position on this.
What do you think about barring the press from the public?
Well, that's disgusting. It's simply disgusting. And the fact that they wouldn't allow more than a couple dozen people in the room or have a larger room on an issue like this is disgusting.
I introduced myself and said, I have a simple message. The queer chickens have come home to roost. All of the corporatization of the movement led by the Human Rights Campaign in the past decade has thrown off every social justice issue. The only issue people in Gay Inc. want us to deal with is marriage and military.
They put the whole of us on the spot as if we had to defend this when it's them that had to defend the indefensible.
We'd have a list of demands for the march. It wasn't a parade, it was a march. It was a protest march, and we'd have a list of demands. And our demands always included things like end the Vietnam War, up until '74 when it ended. And then it would be like free the Black Panthers.
And I mean politics in the sense of demanding affordable housing, good jobs, access to health care.
That's what we stood for. We stood for a coalition with all other struggles because we knew that we were part of a bigger struggle. And I think Pride lost it a long time ago.
Do you think that the Pride Committee represents the gay community locally?
Well, I know, but I want him last week.
No, I can't say that that's true anymore.
I'm good friends with him.
No, I think that they're beholden to kiss corporate ass.
Let more upstairs! 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 Let more upstairs!
That's the spirit of Stonewall lives.
Yeah, it's very heartwarming to see people show up and demand to be heard and to assert good values. I miss that.
Well, we went through the same thing in our community center here in New York when they banned Queers Against Israeli Apartheid, which, by the way,
more of that in international news.
Okay, but I mean, this was terrific.
It was, and we wanted you to see the whole thing and get a real flavor of what was happening.
Now, you know,
there.
We forgot to mention Idaho, which is the International Day Against Homophobia. Well, they're going to have in Harvey Milk Plaza in San Francisco an Idaho rally for Bradley Manning on May 17th from 6 to 7 p.m. out there.
And then on June 1st, there will be a demonstration at Fort Meade in Maryland because Bradley Manning's trial starts there on June 3rd.
And there are buses leaving from all over the place to go down to the rally at Fort Meade on the 1st.
So you can get information about all of that at the bradleymanning.org website.
Right. And San Francisco Supervisor David Campos spoke out about all this and said that what's going on is a disgrace and the process is a disgrace and
disgusting.
Needs to be fixed. Yeah. Well, yes, our favorite word today. But, you know, they had a meeting scheduled, another public meeting scheduled, and they canceled it, the San Francisco Pride Committee. And I think they were trying to put it off till after the parade is over or something. This is just unacceptable.
You know, the thing...
Face your public. You say you're a community group, face the community.
The thing... People ask me about ACT UP and what I liked about it and what the best parts were and what the highlights were. And I repeat that what I loved about ACT UP was that it was a democracy and it was completely open and transparent. Whoever showed up got to speak and be there and be a member. There was no hierarchy. There was no one shutting it down and throwing out the press.
That's the way it always was in the early days of the movement for about the first 10 years. It was difficult, and you had to put up with a lot of stuff. But it was worth it because everybody had the same power. Everybody.
There is such a knee-jerk urge to shut down dissent and passionate discussion. People are so afraid of it, and they miss the joy of life in that.
Right.
And
absolutely.
Very, very disturbing. All
Well,
right.
I mean, not to belabor it, but we also used to all be in the same room together
Yeah.
about one thing.
Yeah.
And when we all went off in our little subgroups and things like that, there's no place where the community really comes together as a community and really decides anything.
And
anymore.
we've abdicated to the professionalization of this.
Yep.
All these groups are, paid employees and hierarchies and corporatized, and all of that may
with
be
no connection to the grassroots other than as donors.
None.
Which is not good for the movement.
No.
Instead of hiring community organizers who really, and again, don't just engage people to do phone banks, but engage people to be part of the decision-making process.
You
It
get
can
a lot,
be done.
and you get a lot more done, and you get things done better.
Okay.
And it's more fun, for heaven's sake.
Yes.
All right, well, one last note locally, the mayoral election, there's some Chris Quinn news this week. Well, let me do it chronologically, because first the New York Times did this style section piece on Sunday. They're inaugurating a new feature of one of their columnists brings in two people to talk and who have some relationship with each other, and it's lunch for three or something. So they sit down, Chris Quinn and Holland Taylor, the very well-known actress who's doing the Ann Richards
one-woman show.
Yeah. But Holland Taylor is a longtime closet case.
Did this come up in the discussion?
Absolutely not. But the opening line of the piece is, Chris Quinn and Holland Taylor would not seem to have much in common. And I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, one is out and one is closeted. But is any of that discussed in the piece? No. And how someone like Holland Taylor can sit there year after year after year with an out lesbian mayoral candidate and be closeted is just appalling.
Now, I don't know everything about Ann Richards' personal life, but she was gay-baited when she ran for office.
Yes. Now, I
don't know.
I
You
don't know
about
either.
her.
But I do know about Holland Taylor.
Okay.
And this was,
You want to tell us how
to
you
coin
know?
a phrase, perhaps slightly disgusting. No, not me, but many people.
Now, the other
who
story
I
is
know.
very serious.
Yeah.
Chris Quinn's got a book coming out this month, and she
Written by Eric Marcus,
out
who
gay.
also wrote the Greg Louganis book and Making History and many other books.
Right. So she decides to, in advance of that, give an interview to the New York Times disclosing what a lot of us knew anyway, but had not been written about, which is that she had a bunch of health problems when she was younger. One being bulimia. This was while she was dealing with the untimely death of her mother when she was a girl, and when Chris was a kid. Chris was a girl.
Teenager, 16.
Yeah, but I mean, her mother had breast cancer for a while and had been hidden from her, and then she tried to make herself, as she says, perfect by being thinner, by getting better grades, this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and it led to this bulimia problem, which went on for a long time.
10 years.
Yeah. And then she goes to work, of course, for Tom Duane, who is, as he says, an alcoholic. And he says, you need to get help. And she does get help. She goes into rehab over this. And she cuts down on her drinking because she was also drinking heavily. She said, cut it down. But and she also acknowledges in the story being an alcoholic. And although she doesn't say whether she's part of a 12-step program. So, a lot of personal revelations, some cynicism, greeted with some cynicism in some quarters, because there's also been stories written about how she can be a pretty rough character in terms of yelling at people and that kind of stuff. And this was to smooth out her edges. But whatever, it's all coming out now in the context of the campaign.
My first reaction when I heard this story was out there yesterday as we're taping was people are not going to respond happily to this, and this may hurt her. But then I read the story and I found it much more sympathy and empathy inducing, and I thought, well, maybe people will appreciate her going through this. But one thing that did disturb me was she did this as she was about to go to Barnard College yesterday to speak to students, be interviewed by the college president. It was actually a small group of students. Well, the college president says to the students before this begins, no questions on politics.
And if I were Chris Quinn, and I'm not, I would have said, come on, I can take any
Happy
question
to
that you
talk to anybody about anything.
you can throw at me.
But this, Anthony Weiner's getting back into the race. It's been, Chris Quinn's bulimia and alcoholism. It's been Chris Christie's lap band surgery, Anthony Weiner's.
And Bill de Blasio has a wife with a lesbian past, and that's all come out. And I will have to say, and I like his wife. Her name is Shirlane McCrae. She's very personable, very good person. But she gave an interview to the Times where she said, she was asked if she considers herself bisexual, and she said she rejects the term. Labels put people in boxes, and those boxes are shaped like coffins. Now, wait a minute. We call ourselves gay, lesbian, bisexual for a reason, to let people know what's going on in the world. I mean, one of Bill de Blasio's, biggest supporters is Cynthia Nixon, who sort of also went through this thing about the labels business.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated. So, on the other hand, Bill de Blasio's wife is asked if she's attracted to women, and she says, I'm married, I'm monogamous, but I'm not dead. So she's acknowledging that she still has feelings for everybody. So just say that.
That's all you have to say.
Don't diss those of us who take on a label, and we do it partly for political reasons and partly for personal reasons.
We're doing it to educate people that the population is diverse, and that's a fine thing, and that people should be inclusive in their understanding and their language and not be exclusionary. It's not like we are trying to promote identity politics.
And I don't want to go into detail about this, but there was a wonderful memorial service for Lou Rispoli, who was killed in October, murdered in October, and there were about 300 people there, and it was a wonderful service. So, international news.
Did you want to do the South Carolina story too?
Oh, well, just that. This is the first time this has happened, where parents are suing the hospital. They actually happen to be the adoptive parents, so they weren't there when this happened. But this child was born and had a phallus, but was intersexed. And they said, "Oh, it's a boy. Well, let's make this child a girl." And
very common. Very common. And the child, of course, grows up and identifies as a boy. Right. But his penis has been
so they're suing,
and
I think that's terrific, and I hope it slows down these processes.
Well, the progressive movement with intersex children is to not do any surgery and let the child maybe assign a gender to the child growing up, but let the child basically decide who
he or she is, or
he, she, or whatever,
intersexed.
Yes, is, and define that as they grow up, which sounds a lot more sensible.
Yes.
Let's move on to international news. Yes. Well, as long as we mention the Queers Against Israeli Apartheid flap, in Toronto, the city councillors there, some of them, I don't know if this is a majority because it hasn't been settled yet, want to withdraw funding from the Pride Parade if Queers Against Israeli Apartheid are not banned from the parade.
Can't use those words, according to them. And again, let's be a little bit more open to free speech, free expression and these things, etc. I mean, come on, Israeli apartheid, how you feel about it, is a phrase Jimmy Carter uses. Mm-hmm. So, okay, big news from Brazil. The council overseeing Brazil's judiciary ruled that notary publics cannot refuse to perform same-sex marriage ceremonies. So basically, it's essentially legalizing marriage across Brazil. There's already other places in Brazil it was already legal.
I think 10 of their departments or sections.
There is room for judicial appeal here, though.
And the Congress may get involved, because the Congress is more and more dominated by some right-wing evangelicals, and they're certainly not happy about this, so they may try to overturn this. But at the moment, it looks like a big win.
Horrible news from Russia in Volgograd, where a gay man was brutally murdered and sexually assaulted. His name was Vladislav Toranvoy, 23, burned and sexually assaulted. 23. Two suspects have been detained, 22 and 27 years old. The police say it was motivated by his sexuality. They're acknowledging it was a hate crime. So Nikolai Alexeyev, the great gay activist there, says he wants to dedicate the Pride March that they're never able to have over there on May 25th to the victim. And the city authorities denied the permit, saying there's no need for such events in the city.
Well, the story of this beating is the murder is that the three of them were sitting around drinking, and the gay guy mentioned he was gay to the other two, who claimed their patriotism was wounded They beat him, they trampled him, they broke multiple ribs, they took a big stone and threw it on his head 8 times.
And
until he was unrecognizable.
Alexeyev has condemned Putin in this because he says basically the guy condones the violence by allowing all this anti-gay legislation to go forward in the country. They want to do this nationally to essentially ban any discussion of homosexuality in public.
Exactly, and that is it's what we've said in this country too, that these kinds of attitudes promote this kind of violence.
Right.
All right. In better news,
well, in Hong Kong, a top court has let transgender woman marry her boyfriend. It's still short of same-sex marriage. There's already a law in mainland China that you can do this.
Yep.
The ruling takes effect in 12 months. There'll be a long engagement.
Strange story from Bermuda, which looks like it's going to pass a sexual orientation, not gender identity, but sexual orientation non-discrimination law, but is refusing to ban age discrimination because that brings up too many problems.
In Northumberland, England, St. Andrew's Church conducted an affirmation liturgy for Susan Musgrove, 60, who transitioned from man to woman. She has been married 3 times and has 2 kids and 2 grandkids, and they all attended the service.
And the liturgy was approved by the Bishop of Newcastle.
What hath God wrought?
They won't let same-sex couples get married in the Church of England, but they will have an affirmation liturgy for a transsexual woman.
But the Vatican's head of the Pontifical Council on the Family told the National Catholic Reporter that he continues to back civil unions. He had given an oblique quote out about that, saying, we've got to deal with all the changing families and things, and as long as it doesn't, abuse anybody and all this kind of stuff. So
So he's on your side.
Anne thinks that I'm just a big civil union fan. I am for civil unions as an option. The Archbishop, Vincent Paglia, is only for it as a last resort.
I say call it anything you want.
Let's call the whole thing off.
They are celebrating the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia worldwide on May 17th. There are events scheduled in over 100 countries. And in Washington, D.C., at the National Cathedral, they're going to have a screening of God Loves Uganda, which is the new blistering film about the work of United States evangelicals in going over to Uganda to promote these bills.
Can't wait to see it.
Kill the gays bills. Yeah, we'll get to it eventually. In Israel, a gay member of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, is going to run for mayor of Tel Aviv. He is pro-peace. He is anti the West Bank occupation. He
would not be able to march in the Toronto Pride Parade.
Evidently. And we don't have all the local results of the Pakistani elections that took place this weekend, but there were about 20 transgender hijra running for office. They have more respect in the country now since they were given an official designation as a third sex. Somehow,
as in Nepal.
Yeah, somehow that has elevated their reputation.
AIDS news. Now, you went to a big forum on HIV and aging. How did it go? I heard 600 people attended.
Oh, well, there were 600 signed up. I'm not sure quite that many made it. And I'm surprised to hear it described as a forum on HIV and aging. It's really about where we are in the epidemic and the psychological as well as physical manifestations and results of having lived with it this long. I mean, aging is certainly an issue there, but it was called "Is This My Beautiful Life?" Which was a poignant thing. What I thought, and our associate producer Bill Ballman, who's standing here, was there too, was I thought the panel, I usually hate panels because they're so predictable, the panel at this event I thought was more interesting than I had expected them to be, and thoughtful and provocative. The audience, however, was a lot of talk with very little substance. It was disappointing to hear what audience members had to say and how long they insisted on talking. But it was the opening of a conversation which I think obviously people are compelled to have and which will continue. And there will
What's
be
the headline?
People have a lot of post-traumatic stress. People have a lot of loneliness. People have a lot of concern about all the infections that are continuing to happen. People have a desire to talk to each other and come together.
And
ACT UP is doing a little sort of reunion event in June.
And I would say the best way to deal with all these things, if we can summon the strength, is to get out and do something about it.
I also want to tell you, get a pencil and paper quickly. The New York Historical Society at Central Park West and 77th is mounting an exhibit called AIDS in New York, the first 5 years, which will be interesting because that's pre-ACT UP, pre a lot of this activism. It's going to run from June 7th to September 15th. Here are a couple of events. There's going to be Larry Kramer and Joe Montello are going to be interviewed by Tony Kushner about Larry Kramer and the normal heart. There are going to be a lot of other events around this. Also, there in the World Science Festival taking place at the New York Historical, also at the New York Historical Society, Central Park West and 77th, on Friday, May 31st at 10 a.m., Ending the Epidemic, Science Advances on AIDS. Dr. David Baltimore, very controversial in his intersection with the epidemic, with Peter Staley and 4 others. That's May 31st. Look up the World Science Festival. And this coming Monday, we're going to a performance, the big Broadway Cares benefit performance.
The Night Larry Kramer Kissed Me.
David Drake, who did it originally and wrote it, and a lot of guest stars.
A lot of stars, Andre DeShields, Robin DeJesus,
If you
Rory
go to
O'Malley,
BroadwayCares.org,
Anthony
you
Rapp,
can get tickets to that
Dee
and
Dee
find out
Wong,
more about it.
And I'm sorry if I left anybody out. I know I did.
Okay, lots of stuff.
Okay.
Maybe we'll put all this on our website too, or in our note. If you are not on our mailing list for our weekly email, write to andyhum@aol.com, and we'll give you all this information.
Okay.
Entertainment news?
Well, we want to preview the movie about Liberace. Do we have time? Or we want to do that next week?
Let's save that clip for next week.
We're going to save that clip for next week. I want to tell you about some things you can see right now. You know, we saw that clip of Riley Roberts, he is queer spawn, as they say. There's actually a group called Queer Spawn, the children of gay parents. Well, there's a play called that at Here till May 19th by Mallory Avedon. It's a comedy about being bullied for having lesbian parents in a small town. And the kid is very well played. We got a picture of him by David Rosenblatt there on the left. And the bully, J. Alexander Coe, is very appropriately repulsive. But the story doesn't really have an arc, and I was left with the thought that this could be good propaganda for the right wing about what happened. Well, I mean, it's not meant to be that way, but the kid suffers so much that people would say, this is what happens. On the other hand, the great David Greenspan is in it, and he adds a lot of spice in fantasy sequences, playing Dan Savage, saying it gets worse, and Fred Phelps. Now, the other play I saw is Colin Quinn, who's back on the stage, this time in a 1-hour rumination on our Constitution. It's called Unconstitutional at the Barrow Street Theater. His insights are offbeat and often hysterical, especially his central metaphor of our Constitution and our system as the product of drunks. The legislative...
Wait a minute, my ancestor was one of the authors of the Constitution.
He says, it's a metaphor. Yeah. The legislative, judicial, and executive branches, for instance, are the 3 moods of drunks. Basically, you will not think of our Constitution the same. It's running for 5 weeks.
I'm going to argue against that, but do sit down.
No, he's not. Doesn't mean they were really alcoholics and drunks.
Behind the Candelabra will air on HBO starting on May 26th. The last film, he says, of Steven Soderbergh about Michael Douglas's Liberace, Matt Damon as Scott Thorson. I'm waiting for that.
You can go online.